February 17, 1944. Approximately 40 miles northwest of Truk Atoll, Caroline Islands, Commander Moriya Setsuji gripped the bridge railing of the destroyer Nowaki as shells from 2 American battleships began straddling his ship. Each explosion threw columns of water higher than his mast, the spray raining down across the deck in torrents that mixed with smoke from his own damage control parties. The rangefinders in his combat information center reported the distance: 35,000 yards, over 20 miles. The Americans were hitting targets he couldn't even see with his optical equipment, firing with a precision that suggested they possessed capabilities beyond anything Japanese naval doctrine had prepared him to encounter. Each time Nowaki changed course to evade, the next salvo adjusted almost instantly, the shells landing closer, tightening the pattern around his fleeing destroyer like a mechanical hand closing its fingers. Behind him, the light cruiser Katori had already sunk, torn apart by 46 massive shells in 11 minutes. The destroyer Maikaze burned and disappeared beneath the waves, all hands lost. The armed merchant cruiser Akagi Maru rested on the bottom of the Pacific, taking 788 crew and 512 passengers with her. Commander Moriya's ship alone remained, racing eastward at maximum speed while American battleships pursued at 32.5 knots, faster than his destroyer could manage even with every boiler straining. At 39,000 yards, the firing ceased. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the American Fifth Fleet from the battleship New Jersey, ordered his ships to break off the pursuit. Commander Moriya had escaped, carrying with him knowledge that would reshape Japanese naval thinking for the remainder of the war. He had witnessed firepower delivered with accuracy at ranges that made Japanese surface combat doctrine obsolete. The ocean where Japanese warships had once maneuvered with confidence had become an American killing ground, controlled not by courage or seamanship, but by radar-directed guns that could destroy targets beyond visual range. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The encounter off Truk represented something more profound than a tactical defeat. It demonstrated a technological gap so wide that no amount of Japanese fighting spirit could bridge it. Commander Moriya and the handful of sailors who survived similar encounters would return to their bases, carrying stories of American capabilities that senior officers initially dismissed as exaggeration or combat stress. But the evidence accumulated. Ship after ship reported being engaged at impossible ranges. Destroyers described battleship shells landing with uncanny accuracy through darkness and weather. Cruisers recounted being targeted by guns that adjusted faster than optical fire control could explain. The mathematics were already being written in blood and steel across the Pacific. Between 1943 and 1945, the United States Navy would deploy 4 Iowa-class battleships to the Pacific theater. These ships, Iowa, New Jersey, Missouri, and Wisconsin, represented the culmination of American battleship design, combining speed, firepower, and fire control systems that gave them decisive advantages over every other surface combatant afloat. The Iowa class displaced 45,000 tons at standard load. Each ship measured 887 feet in length, with a beam carefully limited to 108 feet so they could transit the Panama Canal. Their engineering plants generated 212,000 shaft horsepower, driving 4 propellers that pushed these massive vessels to speeds exceeding 33 knots in service. New Jersey once achieved 35.2 knots during a speed run in 1968, making her the fastest battleship ever recorded. But speed alone did not define these ships. Their primary armament consisted of 9 16-inch 50-caliber Mark VII guns, arranged in 3 turrets with 2 forward and 1 aft. Each gun barrel measured 66 feet from breech to muzzle, weighing 267,900 pounds with the breech installed. The turrets themselves extended 4 or 5 decks below the main deck, with each requiring a minimum crew of 77 men to operate. The Mark VII guns fired 2 types of shells as their primary ammunition. The Mark VIII armor-piercing projectile weighed 2,700 pounds, and could penetrate 20 inches of hardened steel plate at 20,000 yards. At that same range, It could punch through 21 feet of reinforced concrete. The shell was designed specifically to defeat the armor protection carried by foreign battleships, particularly the massive Japanese Yamato-class vessels, with their 18-inch guns and unprecedented armor thickness. For shore bombardment and attacks against unarmored targets, the Iowa class carried Mark 13 high-capacity shells weighing 1,900 pounds. These shells contained large bursting charges that created craters 50 feet wide and 20 feet deep upon detonation. The blast effect could defoliate trees 400 yards from the impact point. Naval officers who observed these shells striking Japanese fortifications during the island-hopping campaign reported devastation so complete that concrete bunkers simply ceased to exist after direct hits. The theoretical maximum range of the Mark 7 gun was 23.64 miles at maximum elevation. In practical combat conditions, the guns routinely engaged targets at ranges between 18 and 24 miles, depending on the ammunition type and firing solution. During an unauthorized gunnery experiment conducted off the coast of Vieques, Puerto Rico, in January 1989, crew aboard Iowa claimed to have fired shells to a distance of 23.4 nautical miles, though this remains unverified by official records. What made these guns truly devastating was not merely their range or the weight of their shells, but the fire control systems that aimed them. Each Iowa-class battleship carried 2 Mark 38 gunfire control systems, one forward and one aft, both complete and independent, though capable of being cross-connected. The forward director sat atop the fire control tower, while the aft director was positioned separately to protect against battle damage, eliminating both systems simultaneously. The Mark 38 director worked in conjunction with Mark 8 fire control radar, later upgraded to Mark 13 radar. This radar could track targets beyond the visual horizon and provide accurate range data in any weather conditions, day or night. The system fed information into the Mark 8 Rangekeeper, an analog fire control computer that calculated firing solutions incorporating the ship's own movement, target movement, wind conditions, shell ballistics, barrel wear, and even the Earth's curvature. Most critically, the Iowa-class fire control systems included gyroscopic stable elements that maintained accurate targeting data even while the ship maneuvered. American battleships could turn, change speed, and fire accurate salvos simultaneously. Japanese battleships using optical fire control required stable platforms to maintain firing solutions. Any course change meant recalculating the entire fire control problem, a process that could take several minutes with manual equipment. The difference between radar-directed and optically aimed gunnery cannot be overstated. Optical rangefinders, even the superb instruments employed by the Japanese Navy, were limited by weather, visibility, and the curvature of the Earth. The visual horizon for a ship at sea extends roughly 14 to 18 miles, depending on the height of the observation platform. Beyond that distance, optical systems simply could not see targets to engage them. American radar fire control operated beyond visual range. The Mark 38 system could detect, track, and engage battleship-sized targets at ranges exceeding 35,000 yards, nearly 21 miles. The system provided continuous tracking updates, adjusted for both ships' movements, and could maintain firing solutions through smoke, rain, darkness, or any other condition that would blind optical systems. During the Battle of Guadalcanal in November 1942, the battleship Washington had demonstrated these capabilities against the Japanese battleship Kirishima. In complete darkness, Washington's radar-directed guns inflicted fatal damage on Kirishima, while American commanders reported that they could see Kirishima only because she was burning. The Japanese ship's optical fire control was useless in the darkness, while Washington's radar allowed her to target precisely. By the time Iowa-class battleships entered service in 1943 and 44, American fire control technology had advanced even further. The Mark 38 system represented the most sophisticated naval gunnery equipment ever mounted on battleships. Operators in the plotting rooms could maintain firing solutions on multiple targets, switch between them instantly, and deliver salvos with dispersion patterns measured in tens of yards at ranges where Japanese shells would scatter across hundreds of yards. Japanese naval officers educated in the classical theories of Alfred Thayer Mahan had been trained to expect decisive fleet actions fought at ranges between 10,000 and 20,000 yards. At such distances, superior optical fire control, well-trained gun crews, and aggressive tactics could overcome many disadvantages. Japanese gunnery doctrine emphasized the importance of concentration of fire, rapid salvos, and night fighting, where superior optical equipment would provide advantages. This doctrine had proven effective in the early war. At the First Naval Battle of Guadalcanal in November 1942, Japanese night fighting tactics using superior optical equipment had nearly destroyed an American cruiser force. At the Battle of Tassafaronga later that same month, Japanese destroyers using only their long-lance torpedoes had sunk one American cruiser and damaged 3 others. These successes reinforced Japanese confidence in their training and equipment. But radar-directed gunnery changed everything. The night-fighting advantages provided by superior optical equipment became irrelevant when American ships could see through darkness with radar. The tactics of closing to decisive range meant exposing Japanese ships to accurate American fire before Japanese guns could engage effectively. Most devastating of all, the speed of American fire control updates meant that Japanese ships maneuvering to evade became predictable targets as American computers calculated their courses and fed corrections to the guns automatically. Japanese naval intelligence had detected the existence of American radar by 1942. Captured equipment and interrogation of prisoners revealed some capabilities, but understanding that radar existed differed fundamentally from comprehending how it transformed naval combat. Japanese engineers developed their own radar sets, mounting them on battleships and cruisers. The Type 21 radar entered service in 1943, providing surface search capabilities out to about 27,000 yards against battleship-sized targets. However, Japanese radar development focused on detection rather than fire control. The sets could determine bearing to targets but struggled to provide accurate range information suitable for gunnery solutions. Japanese fire control continued to rely primarily on optical rangefinders for targeting data, using radar only for initial detection and general course information. This hybrid system proved inadequate against American ships equipped with radar designed specifically for fire control applications. The fundamental problem was that Japanese radar operated at longer wavelengths, unsuitable for the angular accuracy required by fire control computers. Only with the advent of 10 cm and later 3 cm wavelength radars could true blind fire capability be achieved, where firing ships never needed visual contact with targets. Neither Germany nor Japan developed such systems during the war. American and British forces achieved this capability, with American sets proving particularly effective for continuous fire control solutions. For Japanese sailors trained to trust their excellent optical equipment, the first encounters with American radar-directed gunnery produced psychological shock as profound as the physical damage inflicted. Commanders reported shells arriving with no warning, fired from ships they could not see, landing with accuracy that suggested the Americans possessed supernatural targeting abilities. Some attributed it to new fire control techniques or superior training. Others speculated about revolutionary aiming systems. Few initially understood that the Americans had developed an entirely new way of fighting naval battles. The light cruiser Katori's final action off-truck demonstrated the disparity viscerally. Already damaged by American air attacks, Katori attempted to flee the atoll with a small escort group. American aircraft had weakened her, but Admiral Spruance wanted a surface engagement. He ordered his carrier commander to wave off further airstrikes and personally led Task Group 50.9 into battle from New Jersey's bridge. Iowa closed with Katori at an average range of 14,500 yards. The battleship fired 46 16-inch high-capacity shells and 124 5-inch rounds. Every one of the 8 salvos fired straddled the Japanese cruiser. Observers reported hits with Iowa's second salvo. After Iowa's 4th salvo, Katori listed heavily to port, exposing 7 large shell holes, approximately 5 feet in diameter, in her starboard side. Damage on her port side proved even more extensive. Within 11 minutes of coming under Iowa's guns, Katori rolled over and sank with all hands, taking approximately 300 crew members and all the survivors previously rescued from the merchant cruiser Akagi Maru. The destroyer Maikaze stood by the sinking cruiser and fired torpedoes at Iowa and New Jersey. American aircraft overhead warned the battleships, and the torpedoes passed ahead of New Jersey without hitting. Maikaze then came under combined fire from New Jersey's 5-inch guns and the heavy cruisers Minneapolis and New Orleans. Despite her tiny size compared to the American ships targeting her, Maikaze fought until the end. When she finally sank at 13:43, her guns were still firing. All hands were lost. Destroyer Nowaki alone escaped the slaughter, but not before experiencing the full capabilities of American battleship gunnery. Both Iowa and New Jersey pursued at maximum speed, opening fire when Nowaki appeared on radar at 35,000 yards. The first salvos straddled the fleeing destroyer. As Nowaki disappeared into the sun's glare, both American battleships continued firing under radar control alone, with no visual contact whatsoever with their target. At 35,700 yards, New Jersey's guns achieved a straddle that inflicted splinter damage on Nowaki. This shot, fired at 20.3 statute miles, established the record for the longest-ranged straddle in history. The engagement continued until the range opened to 39,000 yards, at which point Admiral Spruance ordered ceasefire. Nowaki had escaped, but barely, and only because Spruance decided the expenditure of ammunition no longer justified the diminishing probability of a kill. Commander Moriya brought Nowaki back to Yokosuka, carrying information that would be repeated in wardrooms and fleet headquarters throughout the remaining months of the war. The Americans possessed battleships faster than Japanese destroyers. Their guns could hit targets at ranges Japanese optical equipment couldn't even detect. Their fire control systems worked through any weather, in complete darkness, and adjusted so rapidly that evasive maneuvering became predictable rather than defensive. Most disturbing of all, the accuracy never wavered. Japanese doctrine taught that gun dispersion increased dramatically with range, making hits beyond 20,000 yards matters of probability rather than certainty. American guns demonstrated no such limitation. They fired salvos that landed together, tightening patterns around targets with mechanical precision regardless of distance. It suggested fire control capabilities beyond anything Japanese naval engineers had achieved or even conceptualized. The morning after Truk, Japanese staff officers began receiving reports from survivors and from monitoring American radio communications. The picture that emerged contradicted everything Japanese naval doctrine assumed about battleship combat. The Americans had fundamentally changed the rules of surface warfare through technology that made visual range engagement suicidal for ships without equivalent capabilities. In subsequent months, additional encounters would reinforce these lessons. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, Iowa and other American battleships formed defensive screens around aircraft carriers, their radar-directed anti-aircraft guns destroying Japanese aircraft at ranges that made conventional optical fire control impossible. Japanese pilots reported walls of flak so dense that survival seemed impossible, created by fire control systems that tracked multiple targets simultaneously and engaged them with mechanical efficiency. During the Battle off Samar in October 1944, Japanese battleships, including Yamato, engaged American escort carriers and destroyers at close range. Despite their overwhelming firepower advantage, Japanese ships struggled to achieve hits against small, maneuvering targets. Meanwhile, American destroyers using 5-inch guns with radar direction landed hundreds of shells on Japanese heavy cruisers with accuracy that stunned Japanese commanders. Vice Admiral Kurita, leading the Japanese center force, later reported that the ferocity and accuracy of American return fire convinced him he faced fleet carriers with heavy escorts rather than the small escort carriers actually present. The pattern repeated across every major surface engagement in 1944 and 45. Japanese ships, regardless of their size or firepower, found themselves outranged and outshot by American vessels equipped with radar fire control. The psychological impact on Japanese naval forces proved as devastating as the physical destruction inflicted. Lieutenant Commander Nambu Nukio, commanding the massive submarine aircraft carrier I-401, he told American interrogators after Japan's surrender that the moment he understood Japan had lost the war came not from any battle. It came from overhearing American radio traffic during a patrol in 1945, the casual efficiency in American communications, the abundance of resources mentioned in routine transmissions, the sheer volume of coordinated operations across thousands of miles of ocean, all pointed to capabilities Japan simply could not match. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. For thousands of Japanese sailors who encountered Iowa-class battleships or their escorts, the realization came through direct, terrifying experience with American firepower. These were not dramatic last stands or heroic battles. They were systematic demonstrations of technological superiority so complete that resistance became futile, survival became improbable, and victory became impossible to imagine. The transformation of American naval gunnery between 1941 and 1944 represented one of the most significant technological advances of the Pacific War. At the war's beginning, American battleships used fire control systems largely comparable to those employed by other major navies. Optical rangefinders provided targeting data, mechanical computers calculated firing solutions. Well-trained crews achieved respectable accuracy at conventional battle ranges. By 1944, American battleships had evolved into something entirely different. The integration of radar with fire control computers created weapons systems that operated beyond the limitations of human vision. The Mark 38 Director could detect targets before they appeared on the horizon. The rangekeeper calculated firing solutions faster than any manual system could match. The stable elements maintained accuracy through maneuvers that would have disrupted optical fire control entirely. More importantly, American industry produced these systems in quantity. Every Iowa-class battleship carried 2 complete Mark 38 systems. The South Dakota and North Carolina classes carried similar equipment. Even older battleships received radar fire control upgrades as the war progressed. By 1945, the American battle line consisted entirely of radar-equipped ships capable of engaging targets beyond visual range, with accuracy that made conventional surface combat doctrines obsolete. Japanese industry, struggling to maintain production of basic war materials under American submarine interdiction and air attack, could not match this technological transformation. Japan built magnificent individual weapons, the Yamato-class battleships with their 18.1-inch guns, the oxygen-powered long-lance torpedoes that outranged any Allied equivalent, the float planes that gave Japanese ships eyes beyond their horizon. But these individual achievements did not translate into integrated systems that worked reliably under combat conditions. The Yamato's guns could throw shells weighing 3,220 pounds to ranges exceeding 26 miles. But finding targets at such distances required optical rangefinders limited by atmospheric conditions and the Earth's curvature. Adjusting fire required observation of shell splashes, a technique that became increasingly difficult as ranges extended beyond 20,000 yards. Most critically, maintaining firing solutions while maneuvering required manual recalculations that took precious minutes during which targets could change course or the tactical situation could evolve. Iowa's guns fired smaller shells to slightly shorter maximum ranges, but Iowa could detect targets at 35,000 yards, maintain continuous firing solutions while maneuvering at 33 knots, and adjust fire based on radar returns that worked through any weather or visibility condition. In a theoretical duel between Yamato and Iowa, the Japanese ship possessed advantages in armor thickness and shell weight, but Iowa would likely shoot first, shoot more accurately, and maintain fire control while maneuvering, giving American commanders tactical flexibility Japanese doctrine could not match. More significantly, such a duel would never occur under circumstances favorable to Yamato. American carrier aircraft would locate the Japanese battleship long before surface combat became possible. American submarines would intercept her approach. If Yamato somehow survived to engage Iowa, she would face not one American battleship, but an entire task force with multiple battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and carrier aircraft, all coordinated through radio communications that gave American commanders near real-time tactical awareness. This integration of separate capabilities into coordinated systems represented American advantages that Japanese forces could observe but not replicate. When Iowa and New Jersey engaged the Katori Group off Truk, the action occurred within range of American carrier aircraft that provided spotting, reconnaissance, and backup strike capability. The battleships operated with cruiser and destroyer escorts that added their firepower and provided anti-submarine screening. The entire force communicated through secure radio systems that allowed Admiral Spruance to direct the engagement from New Jersey's bridge while maintaining awareness of the larger carrier strike operation against Truk itself. Japanese forces operated differently by necessity. Communications security concerns limited radio traffic. Coordination between units relied on pre-arranged plans rather than real-time updates. Individual commanders possessed considerable autonomy, but lacked the information necessary to make informed tactical decisions. When plans went awry, as they inevitably did under combat stress, Japanese forces struggled to adapt because the systems enabling American flexibility simply did not exist in Japanese doctrine or equipment. The Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944 demonstrated these disparities at strategic scale. Japanese plans called for 3 separate forces to converge on American landing ships in Leyte Gulf, with carrier aircraft serving as bait to draw American fleet carriers away from the landing beaches. The plan was elegant in conception, requiring precise timing and coordination between widely separated forces operating under radio silence. American submarines detected the Japanese center force on October 23 and sank 2 heavy cruisers, disrupting Japanese communications and forcing Admiral Kurita to transfer his flag to Yamato. American carrier aircraft located and attacked the center force on October 24, sinking the battleship Musashi and convincing Admiral Halsey that the Japanese force had been neutralized. When Kurita unexpectedly reversed course and continued toward Leyte Gulf, he emerged from San Bernardino Strait to find not the heavily defended landing ships he expected, but a group of escort carriers with destroyer escorts. The battle off Samar that followed on October 25 revealed both the strengths and limitations of Japanese battleship firepower. Yamato and 3 other battleships, plus multiple heavy cruisers, engaged American escort carriers and their escorts in a running-gun battle lasting more than 2 hours. Despite overwhelming firepower advantages, Japanese ships struggled to achieve hits against the small, maneuvering American vessels. American destroyers charged the Japanese battle line, firing torpedoes and 5-inch guns with such ferocity that Japanese commanders believed they faced a much more powerful force. USS Johnston, commanded by Commander Ernest Evans, charged directly at Yamato without orders, firing her 5-inch guns at the massive battleship while closing to torpedo range. The destroyer's radar-directed guns achieved hits on Yamato's superstructure that damaged fire control equipment and disrupted Japanese operations. When Johnston finally sank after absorbing punishment that would have destroyed most warships, she had inflicted damage on multiple Japanese heavy cruisers and disrupted the entire Japanese formation's coordination. American destroyers USS Hole and USS Samuel B. Roberts conducted similar suicide attacks against Japanese heavy units. Both ships fought until they literally sank beneath their crews, their guns firing until seawater flooded the magazines. The ferocity of these attacks, combined with the accuracy of American radar-directed gunnery, convinced Admiral Kurita that he faced fleet carriers with heavy screening forces rather than escort carriers with destroyer escorts. His decision to withdraw rather than press the attack against the now exposed landing ships marked the effective end of Japanese battleship power in the Pacific War. The accuracy disparity between Japanese optical fire control and American radar direction proved decisive at Samar. Japanese battleships and cruisers fired thousands of shells at American escort carriers from ranges between 10,000 and 20,000 yards. At such ranges, Japanese doctrine predicted devastating accuracy from ships equipped with the finest optical rangefinders in the world, crewed by gunners trained to the highest standards. Yet the escort carriers zigzagged through smoke screens and rain squalls for more than 2 hours before the first major damage occurred, and even then, Only one escort carrier was sunk by gunfire before Kurita ordered withdrawal. Meanwhile, American destroyers using 5-inch guns with Mark 37 radar directors achieved hits on Japanese heavy cruisers at ranges between 8,000 and 15,000 yards while maneuvering at high speed and under heavy fire. The Mark 37 system, designed primarily for anti-aircraft work, proved devastatingly effective against surface targets when operators had time to calculate proper solutions. Japanese officers reported that American 5-inch fire arrived with accuracy, suggesting much larger guns, landing in patterns that indicated fire control capabilities beyond anything they had anticipated. The lesson Japanese survivors carried from Samar reinforced what Commander Moriya had learned off Truk 9 months earlier. American fire control technology had made conventional surface combat suicidal for Japanese ships. The courage of Japanese crews, the quality of their training, the magnificence of their ships, all these factors became irrelevant when American vessels could hit targets beyond Japanese visual range while maintaining firing solutions through maneuvers that disrupted Japanese optical fire control. By 1945, Japanese naval forces had effectively ceased offensive operations. The few remaining major surface ships stayed in port, either unable to sortie due to fuel shortages or held in reserve for a final decisive battle that never came. When Yamato sortied in April 1945 for Operation Ten-Go, a planned suicide attack against American forces invading Okinawa, she never reached her target. American submarines detected her departure. American carrier aircraft located her before she reached Okinawa. Waves of bombers and torpedo planes attacked through the afternoon of April 7th, hitting Yamato with at least 11 torpedoes and 6 bombs before she capsized and exploded, taking more than 3,000 crew members with her. No American surface ships participated in Yamato's destruction. The massive battleship, designed to achieve superiority over any American capital ship through sheer size and firepower, was destroyed by carrier aircraft operating beyond the range of her guns. Her magnificent 18-inch guns never fired at enemy warships during her entire career. The decisive battle for which she had been designed and built never occurred, because American carrier aviation and submarine warfare had rendered such battles obsolete before they could be fought. For Iowa-class battleships, the war followed a different trajectory. Iowa, New Jersey, Missouri, and Wisconsin spent most of their wartime service screening aircraft carriers, their anti-aircraft batteries and radar-directed guns, providing defense against kamikaze attacks, while their speed allowed them to keep pace with fast carrier task forces. They bombarded shore installations before amphibious landings, their 16-inch guns destroying Japanese fortifications that would have inflicted heavy casualties on inlanding troops. They served as fleet flagships, their sophisticated communications equipment and spacious flag quarters, making them ideal platforms for senior commanders directing complex operations. But they rarely engaged in the surface combat for which they had been designed. Iowa's action off Truk represented her only surface engagement against enemy warships during the entire war. New Jersey participated in the same action but never again fired her main battery at enemy ships. Missouri and Wisconsin served throughout 1944 and 45 without ever engaging enemy surface vessels with their main batteries, though both conducted extensive shore bombardment missions and served in anti-aircraft roles. The Battle of Surigao Strait on October 25, 1944, represented the last battleship engagement in history, fought between older American battleships with radar fire control and Japanese battleships relying on optical systems. 6 American battleships, including Pennsylvania, California, Tennessee, West Virginia, Maryland, and Mississippi, formed a battle line across the strait and waited for Vice Admiral Nishimura's southern force to approach. American destroyers preceded the battleships, launching torpedo attacks that crippled both Japanese battleships Yamashiro and Fuso before they reached gun range. When American battleships opened fire, they did so using radar fire control that allowed them to engage targets before Japanese optical systems could acquire them. The battle lasted less than 30 minutes before Yamashiro capsized and sank, taking Admiral Nishimura and most of her crew with her. Fuso had already broken in two and sunk from torpedo damage. The engagement demonstrated that even older American battleships with radar fire control possessed decisive advantages over Japanese ships without equivalent systems. None of the Iowa class participated in Surigao Strait because they remained with Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet, chasing Japanese carriers to the north. Their absence made no difference to the battle's outcome. The older battleships with radar fire control proved sufficient to annihilate Japanese forces still relying on optical ranging. The technological gap had grown so wide that individual ship characteristics mattered less than the systems enabling American ships to shoot accurately while maneuvering. The end came for Japanese naval power not with dramatic battles, but with systematic attrition that left the Imperial Japanese Navy incapable of meaningful operations. By August 1945, when Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender, the Navy possessed ships but lacked fuel to operate them, trained crews to man them, or strategic purposes for which to employ them. American control of the sea was absolute, enforced by carrier aircraft, submarines, and surface forces that operated with impunity in waters where Japanese ships once dominated. On September 2, 1945, Japanese representatives signed surrender documents aboard USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The choice of Missouri for this ceremony was deliberate. The battleship represented American industrial might and technological superiority. Her 16-inch guns, silent now but visible behind the surrender table, symbolized the firepower that had destroyed Japanese bases, supported American landings, and maintained control of the Pacific sea lanes essential to American victory. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz presided over the ceremony. General Douglas MacArthur received the Japanese surrender on behalf of the Allied powers. Representatives from multiple Allied nations signed as witnesses, but the choice of Missouri as the setting for Japan's formal capitulation represented America's naval victory as much as any battle report could document. The battleship that had bombarded Japanese home islands with impunity, that had screened American carriers through kamikaze attacks, that represented technological capabilities Japan could not match, now served as the stage where Japanese military power formally ended. The lessons Japanese sailors learned through encounters with Iowa-class battleships and American radar fire control shaped post-war Japanese naval development. When Japan established the Maritime Self-Defense Force in the 1950s, emphasis shifted from individual ship excellence to integrated systems incorporating American technology and doctrine. Japanese officers who had survived the war worked with American advisors to build a modern navy based on principles learned through bitter defeat. The transformation was complete by the 1980s, when Japanese destroyers and frigates incorporated American radar systems, fire control computers, and weapons that made them among the most capable surface combatants in the world. Former Japanese naval officers who had witnessed American technological superiority during the war now led the integration of American systems into Japanese ships, acknowledging that victory had taught Americans lessons that defeat had taught Japan. For Iowa-class battleships, the story continued long after World War II ended. All four ships served during the Korean War, providing naval gunfire support for United Nations forces fighting North Korean and Chinese armies. New Jersey returned to service for the Vietnam War in 1968, bombarding North Vietnamese positions before being decommissioned again in 1969. All four ships were recommissioned during the Reagan administration in the 1980s, receiving upgrades that included Tomahawk cruise missiles, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, Phalanx close-in weapon systems, and modern radar and communications equipment. Missouri and Wisconsin participated in Operation Desert Storm in 1991, firing Tomahawk missiles at Iraqi targets and using their 16-inch guns for shore bombardment missions. Missouri launched the first Tomahawk cruise missile of the war, a weapon that traveled hundreds of miles to strike its target with precision that would have seemed impossible to the Japanese sailors who faced Iowa-class gunnery in 1944. The battleships that had helped defeat Japan nearly 50 years earlier participated in America's most recent major conflict before their final decommissioning in the early 1990s. Today, all four Iowa-class battleships serve as museum ships. Iowa rests in San Pedro, California, New Jersey is permanently moored in Camden, New Jersey. Missouri occupies a berth in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, appropriately positioned near the memorial to USS Arizona and overlooking the site where Japanese carrier aircraft attacked on December 7, 1941. Wisconsin serves as a museum ship in Norfolk, Virginia. Together, they preserve the history of American naval power at its zenith and commemorate the sailors who served aboard them. The guns that Commander Moriya Setsuji watched fire at his fleeing destroyer off Truk remain on these ships, preserved for future generations to see and understand. The Mark 38 directors still crown their fire control towers, though the radar systems no longer function. The plotting rooms where rangekeepers calculated firing solutions sit silent now, their analog computers replaced by digital systems, and now by museums explaining how mechanical devices performed calculations that once seemed magical. For Japanese sailors who survived encounters with Iowa-class battleships, the memory remained vivid for the rest of their lives. Veterans interviewed decades after the war recalled the sound of 16-inch shells passing overhead, the columns of water thrown up by near misses, the helpless feeling of being targeted by weapons they could not see and could not evade. Some carried guilt for surviving when shipmates died. Others remembered the awe they felt, watching American ships maneuver and fire with coordination that seemed choreographed rather than tactical. These survivors influenced post-war Japan in ways both obvious and subtle. Their experiences informed industrial development that emphasized technological excellence and quality control. Their understanding of American capabilities shaped business strategies that sought to match American industrial output through efficiency and innovation. Their knowledge that individual excellence meant nothing without integrated systems working reliably influenced corporate cultures that valued teamwork and continuous improvement. The ocean that Japanese sailors once crossed with confidence became an American domain through technology and industry. Radar fire control, sophisticated computers, industrial capacity that produced complex systems in quantity, all these factors combined to create advantages that courage and determination could not overcome. Japanese sailors learned this lesson through defeat and carried that knowledge into Reconstruction, where it shaped national development for generations. The story of Japanese sailors encountering Iowa-class battleships stands as testament to technological change in warfare. From confidence to recognition of defeat, from presumed superiority to acknowledgement of inferiority, the journey transformed not just individuals but influenced nations. The ocean changed hands not through surface battles, but through invisible technologies that tracked targets beyond the horizon. Calculated firing solutions faster than human operators could manage, and delivered shells with precision that made resistance futile. Commander Moriya Setsuji and the thousands of Japanese sailors who survived the war were defeated by an industrial and technological system they couldn't comprehend until too late. Those who survived carried knowledge that shaped post-war Japan and influenced global naval development for decades. The ocean belonged to those who controlled the technology to master it. That lesson, learned painfully by Japanese sailors between 1941 and 1945, remains relevant in modern naval warfare and technological competition. The 16-inch guns of Iowa-class battleships fired their last combat rounds during Operation Desert Storm in 1991. The final shells landed with accuracy that honored the tradition established off Truk in 1944, when Iowa and New Jersey demonstrated capabilities that shocked Japanese naval forces and helped end an empire's dreams of Pacific dominance. The technology has evolved beyond recognition, but the fundamental lesson remains unchanged. In modern warfare, technological superiority backed by industrial capacity determines outcomes more surely than courage, skill, or determination ever can. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.